court Nora. He wanted to go to the prom with Nora. He wanted to be engaged to Nora. He wanted to marry Nora. He wanted to have 1,000 children with Nora. He wanted to live the rest of his life with Nora. And Nora did not feel the same way about Elmore. Nora thought if they had to spend the rest of their life together, maybe they could be neighbors if there were a couple of houses in between. But Elmore was sure that if he could set his chain on fire, he could win Nora's undying love. So Nora said, go. And we started to ride down the hill. The goal was to be in 10th gear by the time you got to my house, the 4th house down the hill. And I was trying to remember, front brake, back brake. Front brake, back brake. Because if you're going down a hill like this, at 150,000 miles an hour, and you hit your front brake, what's going to happen? You're going to cartwheel, right? So we're going down the hill. Now, children, this will shock you. Some of you may faint. But we were not wearing any safety gear. I was the last generation that could go out and play properly. When my mother said, go play, she meant go put yourself in harm's way. If we came home and we weren't limping or obviously bleeding, our parents would be like, what have you been up to? We were in what my buddy Andy calls the bicycle generation, which means you could go anywhere in the world on your bicycle so long as you were home for supper. If you wanted to go to Los Angeles and shoot pool in a smoky pool hall, long as you were home for supper, nobody asked any questions. What would happen is shortly after breakfast, your adults would look at you in a loving way and they would say, go away. And if you said something like, okay, I'll go, but can I have a stick of dynamite and a box of matches? Your mother would be like, oh, be careful. That's just how the world was. Only 4 kinds of people wore safety gear when I was your age. Firefighters, professional football players, construction workers, and astronauts. If your job did not include having an I-beam dropped on your head, purposely running into another human being, running into a burning building, or re-entering the atmosphere, if you wore safety gear, you were sort of a wimp, and that's all there was to it. Now, I put my daughter, when she was really small, on that seat on the back of my bike, and I put her helmet on, and then I put, like, her elbow pads on, and her knee pads, and her shin guards, and the little glovey gloves, and then her Kevlar vest, until all you could even tell that she was a human, you could see this much of her face. And I put her in that little seat, and I strapped her in, and I went to get on the bicycle, and I swung my leg, and bam, I kicked her right there. Only place I could have possibly hurt her. No, that didn't actually happen. I read that in Reader's Digest, and I thought it was funny, so I stole it, and that, children, is how you cite a source. But we did not need safety gear, because we were wearing something called tough-skin blue jeans. And many of the adults in the room will know what I'm talking about. Tough-skin blue jeans are made by the Sears and Roebuck Corporation, the exact same people that make Craftsman tools. They were made from DuPont Tribond 490 polyester. The sales slogan was, your children will outgrow them before they wear them out. They had reinforced knees. You could not bend your knees in a pair of tough-skin blue jeans. So everybody walked around the neighborhood like they had just tinkled in their pants. And the thing about toughskins was the dominant color was a shade of blue that we called tinkled in your pants blue. So you never knew who had and who hadn't. But these things were bulletproof. You could be going down the highway 80 miles an hour in the back of a pickup truck, and your dad hits a bump and one kid goes flying out, hits the highway. That child would be fine so long as they were wearing tough-skin jeans and just kept from their waist to their ankle, you'd slide down the highway. The only thing that could go wrong is if you had one of these little brass rivets on your pants and sparks started to fly out. If you were beside a tanker truck and the tanker truck was leaking, kaboom, it might explode. But you would be fine. Well, no, you wouldn't be fine. You would be gone from the waist up and the ankles down. But anything covered by your jeans will be absolutely fine. So we're going down the hill. We're riding as hard as we could. And I know you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, how could you ride a bike if you can't bend your knees? Don't overthink the story, children. So we get to my house. Already some of the kids are chickening out. They're like, oh, I believe I hear my mother calling me in the noon repast. I must return home. And so more kids are chickening out. And I was looking, have to tell you this, I was looking for dogs, okay? And here's why I was looking for dogs. Because my father said to me, you have to be careful when you're riding those bikes. How many of you, just raise your hand once I ask you the question. Don't raise it yet. How many of you have ever had an adult say something to you? Right? Wait. That's not the whole, I know you. I'm an adult saying something to you. So, how have you ever had an adult say something to you? And here's what you thought in your little evil child brains. Here's what you thought. You thought this. That adult is trying to say something intelligent and useful. However, what that adult has just spoken and articulated is the single dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Go ahead. Okay, so I'll tell you what happens. Put your hands down. What happens is, an adult, you've seen us, we're standing around. This is how we are, right? We're like, and we'll get an idea. It will bloom in our head. It will blossom like a tulip. It'll be like that. And it'll be like, I am a good idea. I am a smart idea. Find a child, share me with the child. So we go out looking and we're like, kid, hey, kid, come here. And we start to say it. It's like smart, 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 smart. And it comes out of our mouth. Smart, 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 smart. And halfway between our mouth and your ear, the idea looks at us like, and then it goes, dum, dum, dum. So when you hear it, you're like, that's ridiculous. So my dad said to me, be careful when you're riding those bicycles because they have razor-thin tires. And if you're going fast enough and you hit a dog, you will cut the dog in half. And I know my father meant be careful, do not hit a dog. I know he was giving me a cautionary statement, but all I could think was, I want to hit a dog. And it's not that I don't like dogs, I love dogs. Maybe it could be a rabid dog, like an Atticus Finch kind of thing. Read a book. And Dad meant if you hit the dog here, you would cut him in half. I wanted to hit a dog right in the nose and see if I could just split it right down the middle. So I'm riding down the hill, pedaling as hard as I can, looking for dogs. Now Nora was behind us. Nora couldn't set her chain on fire because Nora didn't have a bicycle. Because when Nora was born, we didn't know why, but Nora's legs never worked. She'd been in a wheelchair her whole life. But she was the kind of kid that when she told her parents, I'm going to ride my wheelchair down the hill, they did not say, oh gosh, Nora, I think that would be a poor idea. They said, oh Lordy, we better take a welding class. Because they knew her, they lived with her whole life. They knew she was going to do it anyway. So her parents had welded her this wheelchair. It was steel pipes welded together. It had big fat off-road tires. It looked like if you took the top off of a NASCAR race car, that's what it looked like. It had a seat with a 27-point harness system, a steering wheel, plexiglass windshield, nets on the side, a handbrake. And because she couldn't set her chain on fire, she just had lengths of chain hanging out from behind her wheelchair that would slap into the ground and great plumes of sparks would go flying up behind her. So she was a little bit behind us. We got down to Clearance Circle, where it kind of flattens out a little bit. Now more kids are chickening out. Oh, I believe I'm experiencing mechanical difficulties with my vehicle. I must pull to the side of the road and investigate. So by the time we got to that last part of the hill, the only people left, it was myself and Elmore, and Nora was a little bit behind us. And as we started down that super steep part, I could smell hot metal. I could, you know, like when you're standing next to a radiator and you can just, you know, what hot metal smells. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm about to catch on fire. And I didn't want to catch on fire. And so I looked down to see if I was on fire, and my sprocket wasn't even glowing red, but I could still smell hot metal. So I looked over at Elmore's bicycle, and Elmore's sprocket was bright red. It was glowing. There were heat waves shimmering off of his sprocket, bouncing off his tough skin jeans, going up, burning a hole in the ozone layer. And then all of a sudden, whoosh! A 80 feet of flame just shot out from behind Elmore's bike. It was like the afterburner on a fighter jet. Just flame. He was so excited, he was screaming, "I'm on fire! I'm on fire!" And he looked back at Nora and he said, "Nora! I'm on fire! I'm on fire for you!" And the symbolism was lost on us, but there it was. And so we started to brake. I started to brake back, brake front, brake back, brake front, brake. Elmore started to brake back, brake front, brake. And Nora shot between us, 190 miles an hour in her wheelchair. Something had gone wrong. Her brakes were out. This was terrible. There was no way she was going to make wicked timeout curve. She was going to go off the road, through the trees, off the cliff, into the pit, her flesh, the mer creatures. I didn't know what to do. And then Elmore did the bravest thing I've ever seen. Elmore let go of the brakes on his burning bicycle, and he started to pedal downhill as fast as he could. Well, I had to see what was going to happen. I let go of the brakes on my bicycle. I started to pedal as hard as I could. And just before Nora went off the edge of the road, when all that was left between her and certain doom was the little white line on the edge of the road, when that was all that was left, Elmore whipped in front of her on his bicycle and did a move that spawned the X Games. He grabbed his front brake as hard as he could. He stood his bicycle up on its front wheel. He wiggled his hips like this. He spun his bicycle around in a great 360-degree arc, and his back wheel hit the front of Nora's wheelchair and sent it rolling back up the hill. Here was a child who could not hit a baseball sitting stationary in front of him on a windless summer afternoon, who had just rotated his burning bicycle to knock a wheelchair back up the hill. I jumped off my bicycle, I grabbed Nora's wheelchair, I kind of ran it to a stop, and then the three of us, we were over Elmore's bicycle. It was just laying there. It was just laying there like a head with its chicken cut off. And it was just melting into the asphalt. We were standing there breathing the asphalt fumes, which goes on to explain a few things. And when it was all gone, when there was nothing left but some aluminum ash and some bubbles in the asphalt, when it was all gone, Nora looked up at Elmore. And she said to Elmore in that tone of voice that girls can use. That tone of voice. Some of you girls, I assume, have already discovered this voice. Some of you young ladies are on the verge of discovering this voice. And all I ask is that you use it for the powers of good. Because it is a tone of voice that girls can use that can make boys do anything. And Nora looked up at Elmore. She had a new twinkle in her eye. She looked up at Elmore, and she said to Elmore in that tone of voice, she said, "Elmore, you can push me back up the hill." And he did. The end.